Here's the third beer that I'm putting up against Fancy Papers from Cigar City in Tampa. This is a New England style hazy IPA. Has an ABV of 6.5%, I believe. Rated at 88 on Beer Advocate. Oh, I forgot to look up the IBUs. This one is one of the more bitter New England style IPAs in the hazy variety. Stone from the San Diego area, somewhere in California, near San Diego, I think. It was, let's see, it's also rated at 88 and has an ABV of 72 or 7.2. I don't know what the IBU is, but it has flavors of pineapple, mango, passion fruit, lemon, zest, orange, grapefruit, peach, or apricot finish. Whereas this one has flavors is listed as being mango and tangerine. And when I cracked this open and poured it, I thought I smelled tangerine in there. Now, what I've found in previous comparisons of both of these beers, but not with each other, is that this one is strong. It's bitter. It is fruity, but it's got some more bitterness to it and some strength to it. Whereas this one, by comparison, will taste like a fruit punch. But this one also, when I compared it to Voodoo Ranger, it was a lot like Voodoo Ranger, but slightly more bitter. And I think I preferred this over Voodoo Ranger. I have some more fruit flies around here, or whatever these little things are. But now, as far as color-wise, it looks like the Stone is just a little bit darker. Anyway, I'll do this blindfolded, just to see if I can tell the difference, because I think I can. I think that the Papers one, I'm losing my mind. I can't think of what I just said a second ago. What is that? Not Hazy Papers. Let's see. Fancy Papers. Fancy Papers. Now, I know that it's significantly more bitter than the Voodoo Ranger, so I think it's going to be more bitter than the Stone Delicious as well. All right, let's get down to it. There's a slight fruity aroma. Not really much of an aroma at all. That was a nice big swig. That was smooth. That was delicious. It didn't have any bitterness to it. Not much bitterness. Much more bitter. Much more of a in-your-face type of bitterness in comparison to this. Now, I'm sure that you'll get some IPAs that are a lot more bitter than this. As I said before in an earlier video, both of these are New England style. Both of them are hazy, which means they're unfiltered, or filtered very little. And there's a style that uses a dry hopping, top fermentation. And I really don't know much about it, but it's intended to produce an aroma and intended to be fruity. And it's usually tropical fruit, like mangoes. Sometimes there's peach flavors, sometimes there's apricot flavors, sometimes there's pineapple flavors, tangerine. These are all the types of flavors that you'll find in this style of beer. It's not classified as a fruit beer. It's strong. Strong in comparison. I believe this is Fancy Papers. I'm going to move over here. And I believe this is a stone. I might as well open my eyes. There's no tape on the bottom of that one. And there is tape on this one. So I was right. I did guess correctly. They're both good. I could drink them both. Although, I believe this Fancy Papers is going to take some getting used to because of its bitterness. Whereas the Stone, compared to Voodoo Ranger, it's very similar and it's slightly more bitter, and I liked it. I believe I liked it better than Voodoo Ranger. It is good. So I have one more beer left from my previous comparisons. That is Hazy Jane, which is another strong beer like this. So that's why I saved that one for last, which I'll do after this comparison, maybe tomorrow. But it'll be interesting to see how Brewdog Hazy Jane is going to stack up against this, since they both have that bite. I used this analogy in a previous video when I did Hazy Jane against Voodoo Ranger. Voodoo Ranger was like a fruit punch, and Hazy Jane was more like a lemon juice. It had that kind of strength to it, that kind of sourness or bitterness or tanginess to it that the Voodoo Ranger, the fruit punch, didn't have. And this is also like a fruit punch, at least in comparison to this. Now, when I did this against Voodoo Ranger, as I said, it was slightly more bitter, and I preferred it because I do like some bitterness in my beer. And that's usually the bitterness comes from hops. And the thing with IPAs, I think, regardless of the style, is that they use a lot of hops. Now, the history of IPAs, which you're probably aware of, is that the English soldiers who were stationed in India missed having their English ales. So England started shipping them English ales. But by the time they got there, they weren't any good. They were spoiled or whatever. So they hopped them up because hops act as a preservative. And that's why they called it an India Pale Ale, IPA. And it's also why they're very hoppy, because it was a necessity to ship that beer so it would last and survive the trip. At least that's my understanding. I could be wrong. So don't take what I'm saying as gospel truth. That's the story that I've read about or heard. You look up the history of IPAs. I think I read something like that. And that's just a simple summary of what I remember. So I could have some details wrong. I got to give this one a Stone. Yeah, I would definitely rather have another Stone than a Fancy Papers. Stone in general makes some good beers. But so does Cigar City. Cigar City out of Tampa, they make some decent beers as well. And a very popular one is Highlight, which is very popular in the Southeast. Just about anywhere that you go in Florida, you could find a Hyali. Although I'm not seeing as much as I used to. I think some places are not selling it as much as they used to. I could be wrong, because I usually don't get it anymore. I switched back to drinking lagers, but not American adjunct lagers. Now, that's an interesting take, where the Fancy Papers added some bitterness to this Stone Delicious IPA. It's still somewhat bitter. And of course, the fruitiness that this one had is significantly diluted. I think this 50-50 mixture of these two beers, this one dominates. This one is what is coming through the most. But it's good. I think it's better than the Fancy Papers by itself, but I don't think it's as good as the Stone Delicious by itself. So I'm going to give the Stone Delicious the win on this one, at least for now. At least that's what I would prefer to drink. If I had to drink another one after this, I would probably drink that. Or actually, if I had a 6-pack of each, I'd probably drink the Fancy Papers to get rid of it and save the Stone Delicious for last. Save the best for last. So, but if I'm out and about at a bar and these are the only two beers they have, I'll get the Stone. Or I'd get the Stone anyway, depending on what else they had there. I mean, if the only other selections were Budweiser, or Miller, or Coors, or any kind of light beer, I'd definitely get the Stone over that. I'm also not a big fan of amber lagers. They're okay. I'll drink them. But I prefer regular lagers. Amber lagers are a bit more malty, a bit more smoky, a bit more, what do I want to say here? Have maybe a burnt taste to them in comparison. Maybe leaning more towards the coffee end of the spectrum. Whereas when you get to stouts and porters, they're very much more coffee-ish. So when you get to the red and amber lagers, they are going in that direction. At least in my perspective. But I do like stouts. I like doppelbocks too, and Scotch ales, wee heavies. There's also another. Don't confuse a Scotch ale and a Scottish ale. They're two different styles. Scotch ales are strong. They are dark, heavy, and high in alcohol. Scotch ale or Scottish ales are kind of a light version of a Scotch ale. It's going towards the same flavor and going towards the same feel and everything, but it has less alcohol and not quite as strong. So generally, when I have the choice, if I go to a brewery and they have a Scotch ale or a doppelbock, those are the beers that I'll get first. And then I like to get Czech Pilsners if they have them. Now that's a style, but the Czech government only considers there to be only one Pilsner, and that's Pilsner Urquell. Or Ukvel. I think the stress is on the first syllable, Ukvel, in the Czech language. So although there are a lot of beer styles that claim to be Pilsners, they're not really Pilsners. There's only one. I've said this a couple of times in previous videos. If you watch a lot of my videos, you might have heard me say that. So you go to a beer advocate and get a list of Bohemian Pilsners or Czech Pilsners. You're going to get a bunch of beers listed. But a purist, like somebody from Bohemia or the Czech Republic, is going to say, those aren't really Pilsners. There's only one. Those are Czech lagers. But it's still a style that beer, the Pilsner Urquell, began in Bohemia, and it was the first lager that was light in color. So prior to that, all lagers were dark. But it was very popular and it was very good. So everybody tried to duplicate it. And the German answer to that was the Helles, which means light. And then there are also styles called German Pilsners, which is brewed in the same manner or the same style as a Pilsner, which is more hoppy than a standard lager, I guess you could say, or in different types. So although the German Pilsner is brewed the same way as the Czech Pilsner or Pilsner Urquell, they don't use the same hops or the ingredients, because all the ingredients in the Pilsner Urquell came from that area, the town of Pilsen, which is where it gets its name, which is why there's only one. Now, if there was another beer brewed in Pilsen, it could be considered a Pilsner, because in the German language, from where it gets its name, if you are talking about something that's from Pilsen or of Pilsen, then it's Pilsner with an ER on the end. If it's from München, then it's Münchener. If it's from Berlin, it's Berliner. If it's from the Paulin brewery, it's a Pauliner. If it's from the Augustlina or Augustine brewery, it's an Augustlina. That's why so many German beers and names and stuff like that have an ER on the end of it. It means from that place. A burg. If a burg is usually a small or a village or a town or something like that, so you get the Hamburg. But if you come from Hamburg, then you're Hamburger. If you're from Frankfurt, you're from Frankfurter. You're a Frankfurter or Frankfurter. They don't pronounce it ER. They don't pronounce They pronounce it A. So Frankfurter, Hamburger, Pauliner, Münchener. Kind of like they do in the Northeast of the United States. The New Yorkers, the Boston guys. They don't pronounce that ER. They do it with an A kind of sound, an ah sound. At least in some cases. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there's a lot of places, even in the U.S., where something ends in an ER. In some places, accents in the U.S. and dialects will say that ah instead of So, Bitburg. That's another big beer in Germany, Bitburg. Or that's not the beer. The beer is Bitburger. But it came from Bitburg. Berg being some kind of town, the bit town, and I don't know what bit means in German. I do know what Urquell means. And Pilsner Urquell is also German, and it means the original. So literally, Pilsner Urquell means the original Pilsner. Well, we're going on 20 minutes. This is a long video, isn't it? longer than I like, people lose interest and get bored and tune out. So if you stuck around this far and had a little history lessons, I've said stuff like this before in previous videos, so long-winded and repeat myself. But feel free to give me suggestions, criticism. Say, if you don't like my videos, say, your videos suck. You ought to do this, and I will take anything into consideration. Or, if you want to suggest me to compare a couple of beers or more, then write me a comment and say, hey, compare this or that. If they have it in my local stores, I'll do it. If they don't, then I'll also take donations. You can send me some beer. Although there's a due to certain laws, you're unable to ship beers or certain beers to certain states. So you might want to check before you decide to send me a beer if you do. And if you wanted to send it anyway, because I disagree with those laws. I think that you should be able to send somebody a beer wherever they live, regardless of anything else, because this is a transaction between you and me. It's a personal transaction. Why can I go across state lines, drive, pick up some beer and bring it back, but somebody can't mail it to me? It makes no sense. But I kind of understand why they do that, because they don't want certain products shipped in there where they can sell local products. But this isn't for commercial purposes. So I think that, it should be, it's wrong in that aspect. I mean, it's a commercial purpose for me making these videos. I'm trying to make some money here. But I'm also trying to do something that I thought you might find interesting. All right. Thanks.